got lots of colour for you today and one of the simplest art journal pages you could probably ever do. And the results are just so bright and bold, you can't help but go wow when you turn the page to it. So stay tuned and I will show you how you can do a similar bright and colourful page. Now I'm in my junk journal today, but grab whatever substrate you like to use. And as I am in my junk journal, I do already have some paint down on this page from a previous project. So when I was looking for a page to work on today, this one just kind of called to me and I thought I would run with it and that blue colour and just add some yellows and teals to kind of go with it and cover the page up to use as my starting point for today's project. But you can kind of see that I'm leaving that amazing fluorescent pink a little bit as well, so I'm not covering it all up. I want some of what's underneath to peek through and add a little bit of variation, so I'm only using a bit of colour in different areas and mixing it up a little bit. So just keep it loose and don't feel that you have to just completely swamp this whole first layer. But once that groundwork was dry, I could move on to painting in some concentric circles or rings. And this is going to be the basis of this whole page. Now for my ring layer, I'm going to switch up the colours a little bit, and by the end we'll hopefully have such a great mix of warm and cool colours that that's kind of what makes it pop so well. Now some of the paints that I'm using are translucent or semi-translucent, semi-opaques. If you're using similar types of paints, then all you need to do is put down a ring of white paint first. And this will make sure that those more translucent colours will still pop on this background. So you do have to have a little bit of pre-planning for this stage. And you don't have to have it all organised and know exactly which ring is going to be which colour, and you can swap it around as you work, but just make sure you add in a few white rings so that you can use them later for your translucent colours. And also remember that first layer that you did and all the colour and texture that you've got on that. So don't feel that you have to put a ring on every part of the page, if that makes sense. Leave some space to turn that first layer into rings of its own. So basically you're leaving some negative space rings to peek through at this stage as well. But it's going to add a really lovely contrast to the painted rings as they're much more textured with that first layer, because if you remember I sort of added the paint in various different places on the page and there was already texture on the page, so hopefully that will all shine through when we get a few layers in. And the rings that I'm adding on top, well, they're going to be more of a uniform colour, so it's going to work really well with that textured first layer. And it will all add to the overall design. Now you may also have spotted that I'm varying the width of some of my concentric rings, so they won't all be the same, and you know, they're not all perfect circles either, so don't worry about that. I mean, if you want to make them perfect circles, you can, and you could always use some old plates or something like that to paint around, but hey, throw caution to the wind and just paint them on freehand. Now this project today has been partially inspired by Robin Mead's gorgeous mandala circles, and if you haven't seen those yet then you really should go and check them out. They are truly stunning, and she adds a lot of stitch, texture and collage to those, as well as printing and stamping and other things as well, and I'll link up to her in the description so you can go and take a look. But this page has also been partially inspired by my current Inktober patterns and the mark making projects that I've been doing there and sharing on Instagram, if you've been watching along with those. And if you haven't, do come over and say hello to me on Instagram too. So a project like this just seemed like a really good place to put some of that doodling and design work that I've been doing into a larger area and, you know, play around with it a little bit more. And it's a great way to give these rings a different personality. And, you know, I'm a bit of a doodle maniac as well. Now I decided to go with one of my Molotow paint pens for this part, but go with whatever paint pen you've got, or if you don't have any then try a brush and paint instead. And I really like this deep black that you get with this particular pen, but I soon ran into trouble with it. Now I've not had these pens for a long time and I haven't used them loads and loads, And you'll see my first test piece using just the Molotow pens in a video, and I'll link that up in the cards and in the description as well if you wanted to see more of these. And you'll also find everything that I've used today, plus the colours too, in the description as well. But yeah, no, I ran into a little bit of trouble with this pen because, well, I was quite surprised by this. I found that it had already started to leak and the paint had collected in the lid, which I then had to clear out with a rolled up piece of kitchen towel. If you've ever had that problem, just squeeze a bit of kitchen towel in there and that will remove some of that excess paint that gets stuck there. Because you'll know that if this has happened to you, it can get very messy very quickly, as you can see from the black splodges on my hands. Yeah, really messy. So I did have to do a bit of cleaning up and then start controlling what paint was coming through that nib, which also affected how intense some of the mark making was. So some of the areas look really thick and really intense, and that's where there was a lot of paint on the nib, and then there's other areas where it looks a little bit thinner and more delicate, and that was basically where the paint was running out and I needed to press the nib down again to get the paint flowing. So for those of you who have been wondering about how I was getting on with these pens, I'm still not 100% happy with them, but I do really love the colours of them. But if you've been using the Molotows, then let me know how you've been getting on with them. Now don't feel that you have to put a doodle in every ring, and you will see that for some of them I've left them clear. And I've picked some painted rings to leave clear, and also some of those sort of negative space rings as well, where you can just see that lovely first textured layer. So play around with your patterns and see what you can do with them, and see how you could fill your rings with something different in each one, or, you know, leave bits, mirror bits, repeat bits. It's all a great way to make some new patterns and do something a little different. And I've also used a bit of reflective work on here as well. So if you look at that first central circle, which is kind of like negative space circles, and then have a look at one of the outer rings, you'll find that it's mirrored there with those positive black circles. If you look at two of the purple rings, you'll see that that's got a repeated pattern on it. And it was just a bit of play to bring the whole piece together a little bit. So that's a little bit of fun to sort of, you know, play around with and change up how you do your patterns. You can repeat some, you can mirror others, and just have fun with it. And, you know, you could do a few pages like this and you'd make them different every time. So when I look at this page now that it's done and I'm sort of looking back at it, it kind of makes me think of a cell with a nucleus and then that sort of stripy lipid cell membrane. So there's one for you biology nerds out there. Thank you so much for watching and joining in on my page today, and I hope you have a super creative day.